Imagine you were a merchant in the year 1700. You live in a world of muscle and wind. To move goods, you need a horse. To cross the sea, you pray for a breeze. To stay warm, you burn a forest. Your life and the lives of your ancestors for 10,000 years has been dictated by the setting sun and the changing seasons. Everything was handmade, local, and finite. A world where human energy was the only currency that mattered. If you wanted something built, a human back had to break to build it. If you wanted something carried, a human or an animal had to sweat to carry it. This was the absolute ceiling of human ambition. For 10 millennia, history was a flat line, a repetitive cycle of growth and famine, limited by the organic energy of the surface world. But then, in the late 18th century, in the damp, mineral-rich hills of Great Britain, that ancient rhythm didn't just change, it shattered. Humans learned how to extract power from the earth itself and scale it beyond anything seen before. We unlocked the energy of millions of years of prehistoric sunlight buried in black stone and used it to drive the gears of a new, relentless civilization. We call it the Industrial Revolution. But why Britain? Why didn't this happen in the vast empires of China or the riches of France? The answer is a paradox that most history books ignore. Britain became the future because it was too expensive to stay in the past. In the mid-18th century, Great Britain was sitting on a literal mountain of coal. This single resource, combined with an unprecedented entrepreneurial spirit, would spark a fire that would consume the old world and forge a new one. To understand how this revolution began, we must look at the 5 pillars of industrial supremacy. First was high agricultural productivity. The British agricultural revolution used mechanical seed drills to produce more food with fewer workers, freeing up a massive labor force. These people were no longer tied to the land. They were hungry, mobile, and looking for work. Second was political stability and the rule of law. Unlike its neighbors, Britain had a legal system that protected property rights and patents. Third was geography. Britain was an island with navigable rivers and extensive coastlines, making transport cheaper than anywhere else. Fourth was the scientific revolution, which created a culture of tinkering. And finally, the unique combination of high wages and cheap energy. In London, it was expensive to hire a man, but in the north, it was incredibly cheap to buy coal. This created a massive incentive to build machines that could do the work of humans. Before the factories, there was the cottage industry. Families worked in their homes, spinning wool into yarn, but the demand for textiles was exploding. Britain had developed a taste for white gold, cotton. Initially, Britain could not compete with India. Indian labor was 5 times cheaper, and their quality was unmatched. But instead of stopping, these pressures forced British entrepreneurs to innovate. They needed a way to make cotton cloth faster and cheaper than anyone else. The first domino fell in 1733 with the flying shuttle. It doubled the output of a weaver, but it created a crisis. There wasn't enough yarn to keep up. It took 8 spinners to supply 1 weaver. This bottleneck remained until the spinning jenny allowed a single worker to spin multiple threads at once. Then came Richard Arkwright and the water frame, a machine too large for a home, requiring the power of a rushing river. Production was no longer a family affair. It was an industrial process. Manchester became Cottonopolis, a city of 900 factories where the sky was permanently bruised by coal smoke. While the mills were spinning, another revolution was happening underground. As coal mines grew deeper, they faced an enemy: water. Mines were constantly flooding. This necessity led to the birth of the steam engine. Thomas Newcomen introduced the first successful piston engine, massive and inefficient. But because coal was cheap at the mine, it didn't matter. The true turning point came when James Watt realized the engine was wasting massive amounts of energy. He perfected an engine with a separate condenser, increasing efficiency by 300%. Mankind was no longer dependent on the wind or the muscle of an animal. A factory could be built anywhere. Steam blew the bellows, hammered iron, and drove the looms. We became the masters of fire. As factories grew, the landscape changed forever. This was the era of massive urbanization. In 1800, only 3% of humans lived in cities. By 1900, it was 50%. Meet Mary. She is 19 years old. A year ago, she followed the sun in the green fields of Norfolk. Now, she is a hand in a Manchester mill. Mary wakes up at 4:30 a.m. to a factory whistle. Inside, the air is thick with cotton dust, so thick she can barely see. Now, she stands for 14 hours until her legs go numb. She coughs constantly. The workers call it white lung. To Mary, the city is a stony desert where the clock is the only god. She remembers the smell of hay and the sound of silence, but here, the only sound is the rhythmic, soul-crushing thud of the steam piston. She is no longer Mary, she is hand number 42. And then there are the children. Mary watches 8-year-old scavengers crawl under moving looms to pick up loose cotton. If they fall asleep, the gears don't stop. They are the lubricant for the gears of progress. This was the moment the clock replaced the sun. You didn't work until it was dark. You worked until the machine told you to stop. This was the birth of a new kind of poverty. Not the poverty of a failed harvest, but the poverty of the machine. A world where you could work 16 hours a day and still watch your children starve in a cellar with no light and no air. While Mary struggles, men like Sir William thrive. Sir William is a factory owner and an investor. To him, the world is finally becoming efficient. He lives in a mansion decorated with fine Wedgwood china. He sees the railway as a miracle of human reason. He doesn't see the slums, he sees the balance sheets. He represents the birth of the new middle class, the winners of the industrial lottery. He believes that wealth is a sign of progress, and progress is inevitable. He talks of liberty and free markets while the smoke from his chimneys chokes the very people who make him rich. He is the architect of a new social order, one where capital is more precious than blood. Yeah, but not everyone went quietly into this new world. Meet Thomas. Thomas is a master weaver. For generations, his family were the aristocrats of labor. His hands were his pride. His skill was his legacy. But now, Sir William's machines do his week's work in an hour. Thomas is obsolete. One night in 1812, he grips a heavy sledgehammer. He and the Luddites break into a mill. He isn't fighting technology, he is fighting for his dignity. He knows the law will hang him for this, but as he swings his hammer, he feels a moment of power over the machines that have crushed his life. He screams into the darkness, but his voice is drowned out by the relentless hiss of steam. From this blood and anger, a new idea was born: the trade union. Workers realized that while one Mary or one Thomas was powerless, 1,000 of them could halt an empire. Yet they fought for the 10-hour day. They fought to get children out of the chimneys and into the schools. They were the first to realize that the machine must serve man, not the other way around. The revolution needed to move. First came the age of canals, dropping coal prices by half overnight. Then came the most iconic invention, the railway. Made possible by cheap iron and high-pressure steam, the railway broke the isolation of the rural world and allowed ideas to spread at the speed of steam. On the oceans, steamships meant global trade was no longer dependent on the wind. The world was shrinking. Britain tried to keep its secrets, passing laws to prevent the export of machinery, but the fire could not be contained. Belgium, France, and Germany followed. In Germany, the construction of railways linked major cities and created a massive demand for steel. Across the Atlantic, the United States developed the American system of manufacturing, interchangeable parts. Instead of handmade items, machines produced identical parts, allowing for mass production on a scale never seen before. Even in the East, Japan made a deliberate decision to catch up, transforming from a feudal society into an industrial power in a single generation. By the middle of the 19th century, the first revolution had matured, but a second wave was coming, defined by steel, chemicals, and electricity. Petroleum began to replace coal, and the internal combustion engine opened the door for the automotive industry. Electricity brought a new kind of magic. The rhythm of the city became permanent, 24 hours a day. The age of mass consumption had arrived. Shopping became a cultural activity, and the world was now connected by the electrical telegraph. We were no longer biological creatures living on a planet. We were industrial citizens living in a global grid. The Industrial Revolution is the most important event in human history since the invention of agriculture. It brought sustained growth and lifted the material advancement of the Western world. It gave us medicine, flight, and the device you are using to watch this. But it also left us with a debt that we are still paying today. We shifted the center of gravity from the east to the west. We created a divide between those who own the machines and those who work them. We began a massive, unplanned experiment on our planet's atmosphere, releasing carbon that had been locked away for 300 million years. We are the direct descendants of that first coal-fired spark in the British Hills. We carry the material wealth of Sir William, but we also carry the environmental and social shadows left by Mary and Thomas. The Industrial Revolution didn't just build our world, it redefined what it means to be human. It taught us that we could overcome any limit, but it forgot to tell us that every victory has a price. We moved from the rhythm of the seasons to the speed of the machine. We traded our connection to the earth for the convenience of the engine. Now, as we stand on the brink of a new revolution, the revolution of artificial intelligence and infinite data, we must look back at the soot and the steam. We must remember Mary's cough and Thomas's hammer, because as the machines get smarter and the pace gets faster, the question remains the same as it was in 1760. Now that we have the power of the gods, do we finally have the wisdom to manage it? Or are we still just scavengers, crawling through the gears of a machine we no longer control? I'm watching the past so we can understand the present. The fire that started in a small British mine is still burning today, in every engine, every light bulb, and every screen. Together we keep history reborn. I see you in the next era. I see